On episode 300 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet with Craig and Maria Emmerich and discuss their new book, Keto, the complete guide to success on the ketogenic diet, including simplified science and no-cook meal plans. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/300. The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is sponsored by Health IQ, an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, and weightlifters get lower rates on their life insurance. Go to healthiq.com/40PLUS, that's 40 plus, to support the show and see if you qualify. And these guys are really, really cool in that through a series of quizzes and getting to know you and what you're doing to improve your health, they're able to use that information to save you money on life insurance. To see if you qualify, get your free quote today at healthiq.com/40 plus or mention the promo code 40 plus when you talk to a Health IQ agent. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, and thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. I'm really excited to bring Maria back on the podcast, and this time she's co-written a book with her husband. And so, she's been on the book about her cookbooks. This is not a cookbook, but it is an awesome book, particularly for someone who's looking for just the right approach to getting into and managing the ketogenic diet. She has a very simple plan. They really get into some of the science to help you understand why it's doing what it's doing, and really, some no-cook meal plans that just make it very, very easy for you to manage getting into and being in ketosis. So this is a really good episode. I'm also excited it's episode number 300, and it's also the first episode for 2018. So this is a pretty important episode in my mind. For me, it's kind of a breakthrough episode in that, a lot of podcasters won't stick with it very long. And the fact that I'm putting out episode 300 just really has me knowing that I'm on the right track. If you like the podcast, I would ask if you just take a few minutes to go out onto iTunes and leave us a rating review. I have a link. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/review, and that will take you right to iTunes, and you can go ahead and leave us that rating and review. It really does help, particularly as we get into the new year and people are really looking for information on health and fitness. If you know this podcast could help someone, I really would appreciate if you could step out and help them. And then another concept thing that I've been thinking about lately is that, a lot of folks this time of the year are starting to think about their health and fitness. And as I consolidate homes, and I'm down in Florida moving into my new place there, where I'm moving my gym. And so I'm going to have all my gym equipment set up. So as I was just kind of putting my gym together this weekend, I was thinking through the concepts of, okay, well, what do I want out of 2018? What are the things that I think are really important? And I'm about to cycle back into ketosis. And I know for a lot of people that are trying to train, there's a lot of confusion over, how much training, when to train, that type of thing. So I am going to spend a little bit more time putting that kind of information together. If you've listened this last week, you know that I put together kind of the roadmap. My roadmap does include ketosis, but, it's a little different than maybe yours. But if you're thinking about maybe making 2018 kind of that special year, but you'd also like to hire a coach that understands ketosis and understands how to train in ketosis, I really wish you would go check out 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/train. That'll tell you a little bit about how I do online personal training. If you have any questions at all, you can always email me, 40plusfitnesspodcast@gmail.com. I'll answer any and all questions that you might have about that. But I really do want to start helping more people during the year 2018. I'm going to keep rolling with the podcast. I'm enjoying that. I'm really enjoying what I learn when I have these conversations like today with Maria. We're reading through her book and just all the things that are coming out about ketosis. It's more and more being accepted by mainstream. And so it's just kind of an exciting time to be involved in that area and understand it well enough that I can help you or help some folks actually get stronger, get better, meet their health goals for the year, partially through ketosis, but also through some movement and other things. But so if you would go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/train, check it out. Really, I hope you will. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking to Maria and Craig. Maria's been on multiple times talking about her cookbooks. This is not a cookbook, but it is really a simplified way to think about ketosis, to get into ketosis, and to understand what's going on while you're in ketosis. So really, really interesting conversation, really, really good book. With no further ado, here's Craig and Maria. So Maria, Craig, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks.
So your book, Keto, it's not a cookbook, despite that's what Maria's famous for, and I'm buying more and more of her cookbooks. I was telling her before I came on that she mentioned a lasagna in this book, and the rest, it was her keto restaurant favorites, and I was like, okay, I don't have that one. So I was on Amazon overnighting it so that I can be cooking that for dinner tonight. My wife is driving in tomorrow, so I'm going to let her have some of that tomorrow. But every recipe that Maria has in her cookbook, I could literally just go from page 1 to the end and make every one of those, and they're just so enjoyable.
I'm so grateful. You are so kind. Thank you.
But this book, which Craig, you wrote the majority of it, and it kind of gets into... Oh, half. Okay.
Yeah.
But you guys wrote this together, and this is more of a true guide to getting into ketosis for health, and not necessarily, and in some cases you talk about weight loss, but the bulk of this is that, and you spend a good bit of time really explaining the health benefits of keto and why, and not just this does, but exactly getting into the science, a little bit of the science and understanding biologically of why we can use keto for health.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of, as keto gets more and more popular, there's a lot of misinformation that we read every single day or questions we get every single day. And so that's what drove us to write this book, is that we really want people to understand the science and understand the false things that they'll read online. That's why it really drove us to write this book.
Yeah, and Maria is definitely known for her cookbooks, but what a lot of people don't know is that she's been helping clients with nutrition and supplements and healing for almost 10 years now. And so we've been doing a lot of that with our clients and helping people get healed, and we just tried to pull and put all of that into this book.
Yeah, and that's why I really enjoyed it, because when I first got it, I started flipping around and saying, where are the recipes? And there weren't any. And I was like, okay, so there's no recipes. But in all of Maria's cookbooks in the past, there's always been kind of an education at the beginning. And I felt like this was a kind of taking a lot of all of that and rolling it up into one complete guide. And you even talk about shopping and what you should have in your pantry and those types of things. So this really does set you up for success.
Yeah, and there's even no cook meal plans in there, because I work with so many people who, whether they're traveling or they don't like to cook, hey, I don't blame them. I don't like to clean, So people that don't like to cook, this is your go-to book, because it gives you plans for success that way.
Yes. So, Craig, you kind of opened this up, and you talked about your early or past love affair of beer. And I share that with you. My brother's actually a brewmaster, so I was up visiting him. But I love, I just really, really enjoy going to a good pub, brew pub, where they make their own beers, having conversations about it and enjoying it. I do enjoy beer. I build myself a season so that I'm sort of, I think about it, historically we would have had periods of time when there would be abundance and we would overeat to put on some body fat. And then when there was famine sort of towards the winter months, then that's when I would have less to eat, a little bit more fatty meats and things like that, maybe some fish. But so I kind of try to take that and cycle through ketosis during the year. And it just happens to coincide with American football. So that works out really well for me. But
too funny.
You do talk about in the book some serious reasons why we may want to avoid alcohol. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, my personal journey with that, like you said, I used to brew my own beer, and I was really into beer and craft beers and all that kind of stuff. But what happened is, in my personal journey, when I eliminated a lot of the allergens like wheat and some grains and things in my diet, I started to really notice how beer and the wheat in the beer affected me. And so for myself, it was just kind of coming to realize that, this isn't very good for me and I don't feel very good on it. And so it was kind of a personal choice to, move away from that. And then later when I learned the science behind things like oxidative priority and that reinforced why I shouldn't be drinking it. And, beers, it's not just the wheat that's in it, it's the alcohol. And the alcohol is one of the fuels that we talk about in the book, but the oxidative priority is the order in which your body processes fuels that come into your diet. And so alcohol, not only there's no storage for alcohol. You can't store alcohol anywhere. And so you have to burn it all off and get rid of it before you can move on to any other fuel that you process. And this is why people have struggle that drink a lot as well with weight, because what happens is when you have a few beers, then you start munching on snacks and treats or, wings or whatever. And any of the fat, any of the carbs that come into the diet when you're consuming alcohol basically go right into storage as fat and glycogen, because your body's got to deal with the alcohol first. And so that's what creates, weight gain and that beer belly and all those kind of things.
And also, we know that alcohol is very estrogenic type food. There's 3 different types of estrogen that a woman produces, but even men can become estrogen dominant. And that's why a beer belly is not really a beer belly, it's an estrogen belly.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's a pretty common thing here in the United States to see. This is, unfortunately. But so avoiding the alcohol is definitely going to help you with your weight loss, but it's also going to help you maintain ketosis.
Yes.
And just overall not deal with some of the ill effects that you're going to have beyond just the weight and the estrogen and all of that, because it does kind of mess with a whole lot of other hormones and whatnot in your body.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it slashes your testosterone. So if you're a gym rat that works out really hard Friday morning so you can get your drink on Friday night, I believe we wake up Saturday morning with less muscle mass if you do drink after a hard weightlifting session, because we know that you break down your muscles as you lift and you repair them as you rest. But if you're resting while, drinking a bunch of alcohol, then you have no repair time.
Yeah.
And so you don't actually build the muscle that you're craving to do and working so hard to do. So it's kind of, just wasting your time.
Yeah. Now you guys there's a statement in the book, and when I first read it, I was thinking, and so I love those headlines or those one-line sentences that just kind of stop me in my tracks and say, okay, let me wrap my head around this one for a minute before I read it, because I want to understand what I'm thinking, what I want to get out of this. And the statement was, inflamed adipose tissue causes insulin resistance. Could you explain that?
Yeah, this is something that I think modern science has kind of dropped the ball on a little bit. And that is, if you look at the studies pointing to adipose tissue is basically the cell, your fat cell that stores your body fat in. If you look at the studies, there's been tons of studies pointing to this, but it hasn't been widely recognized. And what the point of it is, there's 2 sides to a theory of what causes diabetes and metabolic syndrome and that metabolic breakdown. The one side pointed to insulin as forcing it to happen, but what's actually more likely happening is that your adipose cells, when they get overstuffed and inflamed, they start rejecting insulin because they can't take any more fat for storage. They've got too much fat in them. And your body, for whatever reason or not, some people they can't produce new adipose cells. And so they when they get a large amount of these inflamed adipose cells in their, for their fat storage, they become insulin resistant because the cells don't want any more fat. And so the fat builds up as triglycerides in the blood and ectopic fat in the pancreas and in the liver. And that is what causes that metabolic breakdown that leads to diabetes. And so it's kind of looking at it a different way, but it also very much explains how you can have somebody who's 100 pounds and type 2 diabetic. They don't have a lot of adipose sites, a lot of fat cells, but the ones they do have are inflamed. And so they're resistant, insulin resistant. And then you can also have somebody who's maybe 50 pounds overweight, but not diabetic because they have a lot of adipose sites, a lot of fat cells, and most of them are not overstuffed or inflamed. So it kind of explains that, scenario.
And that's why I get a little frustrated when, I work with different clients and they'll say, well, my husband's skinny as a rail. He can eat whatever he wants and he's super healthy. And I was like, you cannot tell me that he can chow down on Cheetos and be healthy. That is ridiculous. Just because they're thin, we judge people on their outward appearance. And it's a little frustrating that, someone can be skinny and diabetic and we don't judge them as harsh as someone who has more weight on their body.
Yeah. Well, and I think that people do kind of look at that outside and say, okay, well, that's going to determine. So you have to be fat to be a diabetic, and definitely not true. No. That's been proven over and over. One of the key things, and the reason now, like I said, I really wanted to bring this up was that when I go to the doctor, and they're looking at my blood panel, they're coming back saying, we should put you on a statin, we should do these types of things. And I don't want to get into the whole discussion of whole statins, but I just tell them, I said, look, my triglycerides are low.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a key component.
I said, as long as my triglycerides are low, this is a good blood panel, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. We tend to look at triglycerides, or we will look at things like CRP for inflammation, A1C to understand how you're controlling your blood glucose. We tend to look at those markers more than we'd ever look at a cholesterol.
Now, from this conversation, you kind of got into this conversation called fat flux, and that's the kind of the process where your body basically uses fat cells as a gas tank.
Yeah.
Putting fat in, taking fat out as it needs it for fuel, which is if we didn't have fat flux as a capacity of a human body, we would have perished as a species. Could you talk about that in a little bit more detail? How exactly does fat flux work, and what are the drivers for all of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting process. It's basically this sort of constant flow in and out of the adipose sites. Inside the adipose site is your stored body fat. It's stored as a triglyceride molecule. A triglyceride molecule is 3 free fatty acids linked together with a glycerol. And the first thing it's going to do to use that as fuel is it pulls or cleaves off the glycerol. And so you have a glycerol molecule and 3 free fatty acid molecules. They go into the bloodstream. The free fatty acid, this is one thing that is not well recognized in the keto community or talked about, is that the majority of fuel when you're keto adapted that your body is using is free fatty acid. They burn it directly. Some of that free fatty acid can be taken and turned into ketones. Mostly that is to supply fuel for the brain, some of the heart tissues and things that can't burn on free fatty acid. And then what's interesting about that is when you're burning just stored body fat, those glycerol molecules go to the liver, and 3 of those combine to make a glucose molecule. So that's actually producing the glucose needed for the parts of like the brain that cannot burn on ketones or free fatty acid. So it's like this perfect storage of just enough glucose to supply the parts that need it, enough fat to supply the rest. But what's interesting about it all, and this leads into what a ketogenic diet is and should be, if you keep your carbs low enough, you get into this favorable state of ketosis, primarily burning fat for fuel, get enough protein to maintain your lean mass. Nobody wants to lose their lean mass. Now the fat component becomes the one variable. And when we talk about fat flux, it's the fat going in and out of your fat cells. And you want more fat coming out of the fat cells than is going in to lose weight, if that's your goal. And if you want to reverse diabetes, you want to shrink those fat cells so they're not inflamed anymore. So you want to have more coming out than going in. Well, to do that, you have to moderate the fat intake down to a point where you're going to be burning more fat from the stored fat cells for fuel, which will make you lose fat.
So instead of chasing a ketone number, we want people to focus on that, because people are worried that their ketones, their numbers are too low, or they're not losing weight. And some so-called keto experts will say, well, you're not losing weight, eat more fat, have an avocado. Yeah. And it's really just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, you don't want to chase ketones. You want to look for results. And if you're a very active person, you're going to probably have lower ketone levels.
Mine are really low.
Because you're using the ketones, you're burning
Yep,
them.
I'm always exercising in a fasted state. So mine are, always low in that morning stage.
Yeah,
because I'm using them.
Yeah, and that kind of goes through the whole line. And I tell people, it's like, okay, initially, yes, you're going to be able to use the strips, urine strips, to measure it. And then after a while, your body is not going to eject those ketones. It's going to start using them. So then you're going to need to either register it in your blood or your breath. And at that point, it may be very low, particularly at points of the day, depending on what your activity level is and what you've eaten. And I also agree, it's so funny. It's like when you say keto, there's immediately it's, you're high fat, low carb. And you said in the book, which I thought was brilliant, is, yeah, it's high fat, but it's not necessarily that you're eating the fat. Some of the fat's coming from your body.
Exactly. If your goal is weight loss, some of that high fat comes from diet. Some of it comes from stored body fat.
And that's why when you're fasting, that's probably the highest ketones you'll read, is because you're actually using that body fat for fuel.
Entirely.
Yeah. Now, as I kind of inferred from the book, you kind of said this, but you didn't. Maybe you did, but not exactly. Is I guess Maria started this journey first.
Yep.
And then Craig, you started following a little after that, and now the kids are on board. So talk about how you get an entire family eating this way, because I get this a lot, particularly from a woman that says, if I want to go do this, I can't get my family on board. And I'll say this story with my wife is I was in ketosis most of the year, like about 9 months out of the year, 8-9 months out of the year. My wife's like, I could never do that. I took her to Keto Fest.
Yeah.
And, she didn't want to go, but I bought her a ticket, and she was thinking, well, I might bolt if I get bored. She started hanging out with people and hearing their stories and seeing how much energy. These people were bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm going to go ahead and try this. So after the weekend, she decided to try it, and she loves it.
Yes. And that's basically kind of what happened here, is that, I started my ketogenic journey, gosh, I don't know if it was 20 years ago. And I love my mom, but some of the ways she goes around things could be kind of naggy, and that's something I never wanted to be. And so I still let Craig drink his beer and brew his beer, and he brewed his own wine, and he was really good at it. And we would go to dinner, and he'd order whatever he wanted, and I did my thing, and I still loved him to death. But after years of watching me get stronger and more fit, he just wanted in, it's hard to deny.
Yeah. And that happens a lot with our clients too, is that one of them will start doing this and they kind of lead by example, and the partner will see how much energy they have, how, they can go long periods without eating and not getting those cravings or that afternoon crash that you get when you're a sugar burner. And so you start wanting to have some of those qualities. And so for me personally, I started bit by bit. I ditched the bun on my burger. I don't really like the bun anyway. I like the burger. So, I ditched the bun on the burger, and then I realized I felt a lot better when I did that. And so it was kind of piece by piece, peeling back the onion a little bit there and finding out that I felt so much better eating this way too.
And the food is really good. Most of the time the men are like, oh, this is awesome. I get to eat, meatloaf and ribs and protein noodle lasagna and all of that. And my kids, they love dinosaurs, and we joke that we're carnivores, and they absolutely love the food. We once were on a flight to Hawaii, and that's a long flight from here in Wisconsin. And I ran to the bathroom, and the flight attendant gave one of my son, they said, do you want a soda? And he said, yeah, because we have a soda streamer at home. He assumed it was that. And she gave him a Sprite. He chugged it down, and he got so violently ill. I was covered in puke the whole way to Hawaii. And he said, wow, I never want sugar again. And we use it as a teaching tool. And I think that, once they got a taste of how awesome they feel and how fast they run and everything like that, we emphasize how much stronger of athletes and how smart they are with the food that they eat now.
And I think that also points out how that's kind of the body's natural reaction to that huge load of sugar when it's not being bombarded with it all the time,
And I think that's the other side of the coin is, a lot of times people think, well, the way I feel is normal. I'm getting older. I'm supposed to slow down. My energy level, it's going to wane in the afternoon. That 2 o'clock collapse is just the normal thing. I should go get some sugar and coffee and I'm fine. But that's not really our normal state if your body's providing the energy you really need for what you do.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so many of our clients and followers, the weight loss is just a bonus. They love how they feel, the energy they have, the mental clarity they have. Losing the weight is just a side benefit to what they really enjoy, which is how good they feel.
Yeah. The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is sponsored by Health IQ, an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, and weightlifters get low rates on their life insurance. Go to healthiq.com/40 plus. That's healthiq.com/40PLUS to support the show and see if you qualify. Now, you have a whole chapter, a whole section really on exercise. And I know a lot of people, they'll get into keto and they'll think, okay, well, this is something I won't have the energy, I won't be able to exercise. But can you talk about some of the considerations that you would take into effect exercise? Because, I know I've run marathons, and you talk about this in the book. You're going to bonk at, mile 18 to 20. That's the spot where most people just start running out of energy and they can't finish the race. Can you kind of talk about some of the benefits and some of the considerations of exercising on keto?
Yeah, that was my specialty chapter just because it is such a big passion of mine. I have a degree in exercise physiology, and I do, well, maybe not so much anymore with kids and work, but running marathons in a ketogenic state is my specialty. And yeah, the mile 20, that is for those people running off of, sugar for their, when they do carb ups before their big run and stuff, that's when they're going to run out of energy. However, if you're running in a ketogenic state, even a very lean person has 30,000 calories that they can utilize for their exercise. And that's why people are looking into this for those extended marathons, those 50, 100-mile marathons. If you look into the people that are winning those, they are running off of ketones and doing fantastic off of that. But if you're thinking that, I made the mistake of thinking I was going to lose weight running marathons. Oftentimes people gain weight when they train for marathons, and a lot of it has to do with different hormones like the adrenal hormones, cortisol, and that type of stuff. What exercise is really good at is building healthy mitochondria, and that's one of the areas we focus on that last chapter, chapter 12, is building healthy mitochondria and the ways you can do that. The mitochondria are the part of the cells that give you energy and burn fat. And, long-term exercise is going to help build that.
Yeah, I did a Tough Mudder when I kind of started this whole journey. I said I was going to be doing this Tough Mudder with my daughter.
Fun.
And I said, so, it's basically 12 miles with all these obstacle courses. And it was funny because she and I, my daughter and I get out there doing this obstacle course, and my wife is sitting back at the back, and she starts talking to a guy who's apparently done several of these. And she said, my husband and his daughter running this race, how long do you think it's going to take them? And he said, probably about 3.5 hours, maybe 4. And she said, oh, okay. So she's over there, just seeing the sights, watching people get electrocuted, stuff like that. And just thinking a great time. And then she looks up, and we're just a little over 3 hours in, and she sees us, and she's like, oh, they're here. And so she's running down to the finish line to see us finish. She almost missed us. And that was all on keto. So, a full just a little over 3 hours of intense go exercise with my daughter. We got through the race, and there was no fuel ups on the way. Of course they serve you bananas and stuff like that. It. And I'm like, no, I don't need that. If she wanted one, she took one, but I just avoided all that. I drank water and just did the whole race. And when I finished, obviously my body was physically exhausted, but my mental clarity and my energy level were just perfect.
Yeah, and that's the way it goes. I mean, don't plan on PRing, doing any personal records right when you are starting keto. But Craig can talk about the different phases of keto. But, do know that with time, your exercise is going to go through the roof once you learn to tap into your fat stores for fuel rather than, needing those carbohydrates. But don't think that it's going to happen right away. There is a transition.
Yeah, there's really kind of 3 stages to becoming keto adapted. When you limit carbohydrates to, say, 20 grams a day, you're going to start showing elevated ketones in the first 2 to 3 days. The ketone levels will rise in your blood, but you still won't see that, mental clarity, that reduced cravings and hunger and all the energy. That takes a little longer, and that's kind of the second phase, and that's for a lot of people, that's around 4 to 6 weeks of being strict, staying keto. And that's when actually your body starts making more mitochondria in your cells and your muscle tissue so that it can burn more fat for fuel. And that's when you start to see that energy soar, is when after 4 to 6 weeks or so. And there's kind of a third stage that is longer, 6 months or a year. There was a Volek and Finney study that looked at athletes that were keto, and after a year of being keto, they were still seeing metabolic improvements in their performance. So it definitely is a lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I'd been in ketosis for about 6 months at that point in time. So I was very well adapted, and my energy levels were really good. And so that wasn't a problem. And I want to go back to one of the things you said, Craig, was when you talked about the 20 grams, that's 20 total grams, not net grams.
Yes.
Yeah, we find a lot of people get kind of into a kind of stuck and not seeing the results they want to see when they count net grams, partially because there's a lot of these packaged products like some of the Quest bars or things that have a lot of fiber that does affect your blood glucose and will affect your results. But also in general, I think too much fiber just isn't what you want in your diet. It's kind of a myth on fiber that you need all this fiber. And in reality,
oh my gosh,
the only function fiber has in the human body is to feed the gut flora. And guess what? Collagen is way, way better at feeding your gut flora than any plant fibers.
Yeah, so get your ribs on, your chicken wings. And people that I deal with Crohn's or colitis, they do fantastic with absolutely no fiber. And if people say, well, don't you need fiber to go number 2? I always say newborn babies, they get 0 fiber. They go number 2 all the time.
I have no problem in that department. every morning on the dot. But
and that's the thing. We did a chapter or a section on the fiber myth.
Yeah. So now I have a couple listener questions I posted on Facebook that
fun.
I would have you on and just asked if anyone had any questions, and I got 2. So the first one is from Sandy Tucker Rodriguez, and she asks, why do you still use sweeteners in your recipes?
I spoke on the low carb cruise that Jimmy Moore holds, and that was one of the questions from one of the actual speakers. One of the doctors asked me that, and I asked him if he had children. And he said yes. And I said, do they get to have desserts? And he said yes. I said, what are they sweetened with? And he said sugar. And so I found it hypocritical that, he loves this diet and everything, but yet he lets his kids eat whatever they want. We are a society. Alan, what do you think of when you think of Christmas time?
Well, obviously family, but yeah, there's always a lot of food involved.
Yeah. Food, Christmas cookies. When you think of Valentine's Day, most people think of chocolate. When you think of just about every holiday, birthdays, you think of birthday cake. I love food, and I will always love food. And when I started so I was in this constant state of during the week, I would be really good, but on the weekends, I would do whatever I wanted. But once I got into understanding myself better, realizing that I want to have a piece of flourless chocolate torte every once in a while or some keto ice cream, I didn't veer from this. And I stuck with it for, 20 years once I learned that, yeah, you know what? On my birthday, I want a piece of cake and I'm going to make it. And, like Craig's birthday is on Christmas Day. And I'm like, so what do you want? Creme brulee? And he's like, oh, that's perfect. And, that's a part of life, is enjoying food.
Yeah. And I think, obviously with kids, that's a huge component for us. We don't want our kids to feel like they're being left out. So we'll make a cupcake or something at a party that they can have. But I would say it also depends on the person. Like me, I don't have a big sweet tooth, and I'm more about the savory flavors, and I'll have something sweet like on my birthday and maybe Thanksgiving, and that's about it. And we do see that a lot of people that follow our plans, especially like our 30-day ketogenic cleanse,
that doesn't have any sweeteners in it.
Yeah, that the meal plans in there do not have any sweeteners in them, and the whole point there was to help shift the palate away from that sweet to more of a savory palate. And we see lots of clients that follow that, and after 30 days they have a big reduction in their sweet tooth.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I come from on this. Is if you want to have sweets in your diet, because that's just something that you're going to enjoy, using these artificial sweeteners is going to allow you to stay in ketosis and still enjoy some of that. But if you're an individual that doesn't really care for sweets, or knows that sweets will be a problem because they'll just get you more interested in wanting more sweet foods, I'm kind of in that camp. So when I'm in ketosis, I just avoid sweets entirely.
Right, and we don't use artificial sweeteners. We use natural ones.
Yeah. If you look at the sweeteners we use, it's like erythritol. It's naturally occurs in vegetables in small quantities, but what they do is they ferment it to create more of it. So it's completely natural that way.
Okay. And so a second question, John Sumsky asks, what is a good keto-friendly holiday cocktail? Now, we already talked about alcohol.
Yeah.
But as we're recording this before Christmas, and this is going to go out New Year's Day, but I'm going to share the answer with John. But I'm just saying, some folks are going to want to have a cocktail from time to time. What would be a better choice for them?
So, if Maria would answer this, she would say, get a little bubbly, ginger ale and put it in a fluted glass and act like it's champagne, and you can enjoy the party just with like everybody else.
Yeah, get the Zevia ginger ale. That's what I do. But I wanted to say this, Alan. I love to wake up early in the morning and run, and I just love it. I love early mornings. I am very energetic and happy, and when I would drink, it wasn't all the time, but I never slept good. I would wake up tired and not myself. And so a few moments of drinking alcohol made me have a whole day of just throwing off my game. And so it wasn't worth it. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Craig will tell you what he's going to do on his birthday.
Well, yeah, I would highly recommend doing something like a Zevia cola. What's great about the Zevia, it's sweetened with stevia, all natural, but no calories or no sugar. And it's got no food dyes. That's an important component as well, is you don't want all those food dyes in your system. And so you take something like a Zevia cola and throw something like rum in there, something doesn't have any wheat in it. Like you want to stay away from, beer obviously has wheat in it as well. So if you really want to do well, maybe something like rum.
Okay, cool. I tend to go for the red wines. I find that I don't get a blood sugar spike with those, and they basically allow me to stay in ketosis. I'll wake up in the morning still in ketosis, and provided I've only had one or two at my body weight, just over 200 pounds, I'll be fine the next morning if I've drink some water and do the whole protocol afterwards. But it is something that you have to realize that there's a give and take here as far as what you're going to do and what you're after, and taking that as a priority. Sometimes you have to leave other things out.
Okay, so I think it's funny, those two questions you just asked by listeners. One judged me for using sweeteners, and then one is all about having alcohol. So I just think it's kind of a catch-22.
It is. Well, in all fairness, they haven't read your book, so they didn't really know what was in this particular book. Although one, obviously, she's had your cookbooks, or she's aware of your cookbooks. So
it's totally cool.
She's a reader. Okay.
Yeah. I get it.
I just wanted to add about the wines. the drier the wine, the better.
Yeah.
If it's not a dry wine, that's because it's got sugar in it. So, if you're going that route, drier the better.
And more I'm finding those are the wines coming from Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all I really had prepared today. If someone wanted to get in touch with you guys, learn more about you and the books and anything else, where would you like for me to send them?
Well, we have a website, mariamindbodyhealth.com. That's our blog. That's where you can get a lot of our services from and all
giveaways,
lots
recipes,
of great stuff out there. We have a support site where it's a subscription site. There's tons of recipes. You can make your own meal plans and get support from us.
And we do weekly meetings.
Yeah, weekly webinars with them. That's at keto-adapted.com.
Okay. Now, this is going to be episode 300. And so you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/300, and I'll have those links there. So, Craig and Maria, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
If you'd like to ratchet it up in 2018 and really focus on your health and fitness, and you want a trainer that truly understands ketosis and how to train in ketosis, then I encourage you to go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/train and learn more about my online personal training. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we welcome George DeMarcos and discuss his book, Fix My Knee, a guide to preventing and healing from injury and strain. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.